My guest today is Kannan Gopinathan, an IAS officer who has made national and international headlines after he quit the IAS, the Administrative Service, because he said he was distressed at the clampdown in Jammu and Kashmir, and he believed he was upholding his principles and the principles that led him to become a government servant with this resignation. There has, of course, been a huge debate over whether he did the appropriate thing, whether he did the right thing. And I just want to remind our viewers today that Kannan Gopinathan also made headlines when floods hit his home state of Kerala. And incognito, he actually went and took part in the relief efforts there for multiple days without being recognized. And then it was discovered that this young man who was even helping lift loads there was in fact an IAS officer. Kannan Gopinathan, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Let me start by asking you to describe what went through your head and how long it took you to reach a decision that you did actually want to quit the service. It couldn't have been an easy decision. You've been in the service for 7 years. You had another 27 at least to go. What made you do it? What was the tipping point?
Probably, yeah, that's what one question everybody is asking. What is the tipping point? What triggered? How I would put it is like if you are sitting on a very boiling water or which is slowly boiling, and if the heat is getting increased bit by bit, at some point you feel it's getting too hot and you have to get out. Unless, if you sit a little more and then it's going to, you're going to get burnt. So that was a slow, gradual process, and we were discussing. In fact, with my friends and also in my family, that there is a serious issue of freedom of expression that we are having. And it is not just in Kashmir; it is happening at a local manifestation in many places, including where I was serving. And after this happened on 5th, in fact, on 5th, there were some additional charges that are given to me, responsibilities were given to me on same day. And one of the directions was that, Kannan, this is how a bureaucrat should be. Like a political will says 370 has to be done, and 370 had to be, the special status had to be removed, and 35A has to be scrapped, and it has to be divided into 2 states. Yeah, can I continue?
Yeah, please continue.
Sorry, yeah. So then that happened, and then it was told that you are not supposed to say that this is against fundamental right, this is constitution, etc., etc. I was told by one of the seniors, and not from the service, but my administrator had told me this, and that made me think. And the next day, in fact, I wrote that maybe we judge decisions. People judge decisions by its effects, immediate effects, whereas history judges it by effects of the effects. It's a long-term process. And another 2 days later, I felt the only fundamental duty that every citizen should be having is to uphold and protect the fundamental rights of other citizens. So like that, it was going on a bit by bit. And at a point, in fact, the arrest of detention of Shah Faisal and from Delhi and then taking him back to Srinagar. And the lack of response I saw in many of the civil service groups also. That was also something which affected me. Then a complete, I shouldn't say, but a complete lack of response from the other institutions in the democracy. And the government is only one part of democracy. The larger system is there, media is, judiciary is there, civil society is there. And I wanted them to raise, make noise. It doesn't matter whether government is listening or not, but we have to do, the rest of the institutions have to do their job properly. So when then I don't know whether I read it properly or not. When I heard that even PCI has said that, okay, we don't mind the restrictions and that kind of interpretation, then I felt this is bad for the country and this cannot be. And so one has to raise the voice. And to say that, first I had to regain my own freedom of expression. So conduct rules sort of prevents that. So first maybe put in the papers, regain one's own voice back, and then say this thing that maybe we need to give them the right to react to the decision.
Okay, so let me break this down. You've made many different points in your statement. One of the criticisms against you has been that you have used Jammu and Kashmir as a camouflage. Your critics say that you had received a show cause notice from the
Yeah.
government. You had been accused of insubordination. You had been accused of indiscipline. And I was reading, and one of the very strange things, and maybe you can help me clarify this, that I found in that is that there was some objection to your doing flood relief work in Kerala and not filing a proper report on it. So first, can you talk about that? Why was the government upset about that particular thing? One would think they would applaud you for doing that flood relief work.
Yeah. In fact, it was uploaded. The reason that it was, the point that it was converted to a tour was sort of an appreciation from the government. It was approved as a tour because I had applied for earned leave or, and it was very clearly written that I want to do flood relief activities on an individual level. That was the clear application. Either it can be done as an EL or if the government feels it can be given as a tour. And I had proceeded because the file came back to me with approval. I had got a verbal approval from the administration and I had proceeded. When it came back, I came to know that it was approved as a tour. And in fact, on the file, it was written as a tour. Now, there was appreciation all around. What had happened was during the election period, there was a notice that had come from the administrator, and that which I felt was inappropriate to be done during an election because we report to the election commission during that period. So this matter was referred to the commission, and commission had asked the administrator to withdraw the notice and also not interfere with the election related officials. So once that was done, I was pretty sure that election is over. There will be some repercussions of that. It is very simple. If you irritate your boss or if you say complain, the biggest crime is to complain about your boss to your boss's boss, so or somebody else that way. Once that is done, there will be repercussions on that. So the first was, of course, taking out of the collectorship and giving out different charges. And the second was collection of such memos, and one memo which particularly had 5 points. So I can, if I may, I can say all the 5 points.
Yes.
That the first point was there was a delay in putting up a file. The second was that, this one, that I had gone to Kerala and the tour report was not submitted on that. The third was that there is an underground project going. I'm also an MD of the DISCOM. Here I was, in fact. It's a huge project, and it was supposed to be completed in July 2019, as per the established timeline. It started in February 2018, and the memo is asking why it was not completed in May 2018, which is 1 year, 1 month before the scheduled completion time. And then the other point was why one file was moved as an MD to the chairman directly and not through the advisor to the chairman or advisor to the administrator. The fifth point was why I did not apply for Prime Minister's Excellence Award. You go through all the 5 points. All the 5 points are very clear as to, even I did not take it very seriously. I was very disappointed that, you will get show cause notices on such points that in service, and that too from Ministry of Home Affairs. But you don't bother about such notice in the administration. You can ask anybody in the service, everybody will say that. And I had replied it all the 5 points were replied because none of them made any sense. After the reply, in fact, the end of the July, and on August 5th, additional responsibilities were given to me. So the memo had given, the election related matter was there, then the memo had come, and then the memo was replied to. And then I was called and I was made the chairman and MD of two smart cities, in fact. Then Secretary Urban Development and Secretary Town and Country Planning. All these responsibilities were given August 5th. So there was no reason for me to be upset about a memo and such a frivolous memo. Nobody will ever, there are CBI inquiries going on corruptions and 100 crores and all sort of things going on in this against officers. And why would somebody, and that argument is self-defeating, because why would somebody who is such a coward take a camouflage, opposing the government on Kashmir? If I had anything to worry at all, why would I take such a stand? It's a self.
Okay, let's come back to the issue of Kashmir. Now, the point is that this was a decision taken in Parliament. Many parties outside of the BJP actually supported the government. Even the main opposition party, if one can still call the Congress party, that spoke in multiple voices, though the party eventually voted against. But many other smaller parties actually supported the government's move. This decision will now be decided by the Supreme Court on constitutionality. Was your disagreement with the process the fact of the abrogation with how it was done, or what happened subsequently in terms of the communication and information blockade? Which is the part that distressed you or that you are expressing your protest against?
Yeah, so it's very clear that an elected government has a right to take decisions. Whether you may disagree on the process, whether it should have been a consultative process or not. But once the government takes a decision, the constitutionality of it is decided by the Supreme Court. It's not for a bureaucrat or even a citizen to comment on it. I might have a personal opinion, but it's my place to say whether it is constitutional or not, really. But after that, uh, parallelly, a similar process was happening in Hong Kong. If you see, there's a democracy is happening there. A decision was taken, which was not, the public was not in support of it. And there was a huge protest. And the government first shelved it and then did not completely take it back. And then further, the protest intensified. And there were, of course, economic issues were there. Airports had to be shut down. Airport had to be shut down. So that's how the democracy worked there. There was protest. They did not curb the protest. They did not completely ban the protest, but they managed. There were at times violence, sporadic violence, so they managed the violence. Whereas here, what we did, we took the decision, and then even before taking the decision itself, we started banning any kind of reaction to it. So even yesterday somebody was telling me, so at times you have to give a bitter pill, or an injection so that we all get better. You can give an injection, but do you also take away the right of the child to cry after that injection? Respond to that. That is what is more, affecting me. The decision is fine, but we have to hear the response to that decision, and we have to engage with them and on a continuous basis. Because, as you know, has always had a history of, at least for the past few years, a history of violence, stone pelting. It's not the case that it was not there. So the protest would also include those angles. I'm not saying that there would not have been a violent protest or not. There
Right.
also should have been that, but
Right.
those should have been seen, and those should have been seen. Which are the places? It could have been localized, or it could have been incident based. Or parallelly, an engagement process could be, maybe sabas, or could be organized on a local base. So the way to take a decision and then put it upon people, as if first that their opinion did not matter. Second, decision is taken. Even after that, your reaction does not matter. Even we don't want you to react at all. So I found to be not worthy of the strong democracy that we are, a resilient democracy that we are.
Let me give you a counter view. I've made 3 trips to Srinagar in the last 3 weeks, and I've been reporting Jammu and Kashmir for a really long time. And let me give you a counter view from some of your own former colleagues. I'm calling them former, assuming that your resignation is accepted and you do not return to it. And we'll talk about that in a bit. The administration also has a very difficult job on its hands. And I met a number of very young, brave IAS officers who really are doing very good work on the ground, even in this very difficult time. And I kept asking them the same questions you are. Why the clampdown? Why the blockade? Why are mainstream politicians in jail? They stood with India, they stood for India. And their counter view was that their priority was to somehow, anyhow, avoid any loss to life. And they compared this with the situation in 2016 when a militant called Burhan Wani was eliminated. And they reminded me that that time, because there were protests that spilt over onto the streets and the clampdown was not that strict initially, you actually had 37 casualties by the end of the first week. So they say, I'm not saying you have to agree with this, but there's an internal logic, and they say that our priority is we have to avoid the loss to life at any cost. So if we have to trade a few civil liberties in the interim to avoid that loss of life, then it is a kind of bitter trade-off that we have to do. How do you respond to this logic?
Uh, okay, on a practical, before coming to the practicality of it, on the principle, the right to life, I feel, is only, does have any sense only if it is associated with the right to liberty. So the argument that a person's life can be saved by putting him in the jail, uh, so that nothing happens to him, or put everybody in jail on that, I don't really buy to that argument. I really salute my own colleagues, my own friends who are there, and it's not the case that I don't have I have very friendly relationship with them. In fact, some of them are called also after. So they are in a tough situation, and they have to deliver the best as per the directions that are given to them. And while doing it, they don't have the freedom of thinking or analyzing and putting in a constitutional perspectives, because when you're sitting outside the system, you have the freedom of analyzing it in that context, or in a historical context, or in a democratic context. When you are out there in the field doing that job, you are effectively doing. I've also been in a district magistrate, so you do it today, how to get, how to get over the day without any violence, without any protest. So that is the only task through which you think through. Whereas when you're outside the system, you are seeing it as an outsider, and you see that, see, this process may not be what is what is correct, and this process might not be what is needed in the long term. Coming back to the, I have a different view on this, because when we try to suffocate, or when we don't allow the, even the Britishers had this pressure, valve theory. When you don't allow the expression, the freedom of expression, it's not the case that it just dies down. It builds up. It could build up. I'm saying it could build up strong, and that also have a different kind of reaction. We might plan for 10 things, but there could be always an 11th thing that we have not planned for. And a lot of people, when they're unable to talk to their parents, when they're unable to talk to their kids, or each other, and the small things that are happening, they feel this, that this is what is, happening. This should not happen. This should not have happened. And that, I think we have to take seriously, whether this is what we want our brethren to feel. The decision could be anything. The decision, the stone pelting is happening in many places. You ask the district magistrates of all the districts, you say that you would find. I'm not saying the kind of violence or the kind of scale which Kashmir has, but as violent protests and violence associated with protest, there was there in Haryana. It was there in many other places associated with it. But we seem to think that just by keeping them quiet for some more time, we would be able to get them on to accept. And we want them to happily accept also. So I'm not sure. I'm not saying I disagree with their view, but I don't, I'm saying I don't, I disagree with their view, but with respect to that, okay, maybe they have a logic that their priorities are different and they understand it better. Quite possible. But from our system, I don't think I can agree with it.
But are you being simplistic? Because there is a Pakistan dimension here. There are terror groups here. I agree with you that sometimes we apply double standards to the Kashmiris. The mainstream media sections of it has demonized everybody with a difference of opinion as a possible terrorist or an anti-national, and this is a terrible reductionist way of looking at fellow citizens. But there is an external dimension. There is a long-standing asymmetric warfare that Pakistan has conducted in the Kashmir Valley. There was the horrific Pulwama terror attack that took place, and we can't be sure that Pakistan won't continue to use terrorism against us. Now, one of the problems today is that every time some of us say something, Pakistan is waiting for an Indian citizen to make a point of dissent, and immediately our statements are taken, clipped, nipped and tucked and used on Pakistani media. And none of us want to actually be reinforcing the Pakistani position or in any manner. So are you worried today, Kannan, that you might be your words might be used by Pakistan to rationalize, and at home you may then be considered somebody who has aided the adversary and therefore be called anti-national, which is, a word that is very commonly used today?
I don't agree to both, first is that Pakistan or whichever country, the neighbor, it doesn't matter whoever is there. In any place, let's say we consider Kashmir as part of our country. We consider all as like integral part of the country. Now, if we have an issue within our own home, don't we solve it by, let's say we have an argument, don't we try to solve it, or do we think that, okay, we might try to solve it, but then we might have disagreements, then the neighbor could hear it, and the neighbor could then say, try to influence things over here, and hence we don't disagree, or at times when we don't disagree even a little loudly. But the fact is that we have to live under one roof. The neighbor and their opinions are irrelevant. Why should it matter to any Indian what Pakistan, its ministers, its media? Why should it matter to any of us? Why that somebody is saying, okay, see, your view is being amplified by and taken up by somebody across the border and is trying to show it as something that is bad is happening here. Our worry should be what is actually happening here and how are we going to tackle it, irrespective. Then you can because like this, if this argument can be extended, any kind of dissent, if somebody tries to put, let's say now they're only discussing about Kashmir, tomorrow let's somebody wants to start discussing about Northeast, somebody else to start discussing about, let's say, something that is happening in Uttar Pradesh. So do we stop discussing? Do we stop discussing one by one, just because they are trying to interfere or they are trying to play with us? That's exactly what is being done, so that we don't get our house in order, so that this continues. Whereas if we strongly believe that our democracy is strong enough, resilient enough, and powerful enough to take in dissent and solve whatever is there, then it is highly irrelevant. Now the second question that comes to is, so I don't care who takes who tweets. I know it's a simplistic argument. You might agree in an international forum, your voice could be. I really don't. It doesn't matter, because we are answerable to our citizens first and foremost. As a country, as a government, we are answerable to our citizens. Rest is all there. I remember my UPSC answer at this point. At the point I was asked, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to get into that, but I would like to say that.
No, tell us the UPSC question. Now that you've teased us with it, tell us.
No, I think at that point of time, the United Nations Human Rights resolution was happening of the Sri Lanka issue. The LTT matter was going on, and the way the Sri Lanka responded to it. So we had a stand that we'll never support a country-specific resolution earlier in the UNHRC, and at that point of time, we had changed our stand at that for Sri Lanka matter. We had. So the UPSC question was, don't you think we are changing our principles? Because the question was that we are doing it because of the pressure from the Tamil parties or DMP, TMP, and other parties which are there. So that was the question. Don't you think we are changing our principles? So my question was like, whether foreign policy should be that way, driven by regional parties or like that.
Yeah.
So that was the question. So my answer was very simple, that first of all, foreign policy is what the nation wants its foreign policy to be. So let's say 5 crore population of Tamil Nadu feels that this should be our foreign policy, then a sufficient weight should be given to that. I'm not saying entire weight should be given to that, but a sufficient weight should be given to that. So the foreign policy cannot exist in a vacuum or in a completely detached format from the national politics or the national scenario. Okay. Second part is that earlier we did not. My point, earlier we might not have approved of country-specific resolutions, maybe because we were insecure, because we thought maybe if we do this, then somebody else may tomorrow move a resolution against us saying that you're doing this in X place or Y or Z, because we were insecure. But once our civil society became strong enough, our media became strong enough, our institutions became strong enough, we were sure that if there is a human rights violation in our country, that would be first checked, and we would be answerable first to the institutions of our country more than anything. And once that confidence comes, you don't care. It's the simple thing. If you engage in any sort of violence or anything inside the home, and if you see that somebody else is also doing it another person's home, then the way you react will be saying, okay, it's a private matter. It's a private matter. It's not a public matter. But whereas if you are strong, if you know that you will not do it, then how would you react? Then you say, no, that is not a private matter. That is something I should intervene and stop. So sometimes our policies are made out of our insecurities. Sometimes our principles change. My answer was that the principles change depending on our strength of position. Both are principles. The first one was the private matter is also a principle. The second one, that we should interfere and stop it, is also a matter of principle.
Right.
The one was from the weakness. The second was from our own strength. So we should not bother about what they try to say. And I don't know why we even bother. A lot of people are then just seeing that what others are saying and so that is one part. Second is that, but me saying it will not make any difference. A lot of people will still do it and might call me anti-national. This name calling, I have read about this Graham's hierarchy of arguments. The lowest base of that argument is called name calling. So name calling means if you just say something, about, you can call him a bhakt, you can call him anti-national, you can call him anything, you can whatever you want, and that point, you don't have to engage with the point that he has raised, because you just dismissed him by the tag.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second part of that is the character assassination or the ad hominem attack. That is the
Yes.
next level. But the maximum engagement happens at that level, the lower basis. That is
Yeah.
name calling and the first one. The next level, that's what you asked. You are camouflaging it as an issue of principle, whereas your actual motive was something else. That is you are attacking me. Again, you are not discussing the matter that I raised. You are attacking me. So we spent 5 minutes on that. Second is that you can assign motive, also saying that, okay, you want to enter politics or you want to do this, X, Y, Z. Hence, again, it doesn't matter what you are saying, but it now mattered who is saying, it now
And
matters
why?
why. Now, the third is, again, this, where were you? Then what about now? The third part. That is, again, a never-ending argument. I could have taken a decision 10 time before, then also there would have been 10 more issues. It could have been
Yeah.
done. So
Yeah.
we should not limit ourselves because of these three things. It's sad that I was telling that we should be teaching this in every single school, how to engage in an argument. Once you do that, you will be out of it. We will be very confident people engaging in constructive discussion, debates, and trying to find what is best for our country.
No, I agree. I agree that these tragic binaries and, this pressure to belong to this side or that side, or, we've also forgotten how to look at the complexity of things. But that might be one of the more reasonable criticisms of your position. And that could be that you've not experienced the ground situation firsthand in Jammu and Kashmir. And that perhaps if you had, you may have a more textured, a more nuanced, a more multi-layered sort of experience of the reality. So while of course it is terrible to see people breaking down in tears because they can't reach their parents or their partners or their children, and it has become everybody is talking about when will this clampdown end, why are mainstream politicians under arrest and so on. Do you think that some of your opinion is from afar because you haven't actually lived it? And are you open to the idea that if you were to have, for example, served as an IAS officer on the ground in Kashmir, perhaps you would have a more complex perspective?
Yeah, could have, quite possible. Uh, because being in a position where you have to take decisions while in dilemmas, your own, you conflicting you thoughts, and to take that decision would be difficult. But I am not taking this position as a district magistrate. I am taking this position as a citizen. So you have to understand the difference between that. So if I was taking this position as a district magistrate, you can say I should have a complex perspective on this and try to find what is practical. But when I
Sure.
am taking a decision as a citizen, that is what I want it to be. It's not how it can be done. It's not whether it can be done. It's a
Yeah.
simple question of this is what I want it to be. Now, how that demand, I have every reason to make it to the government as a citizen, irrespective of my understanding of the government can say, okay, your understanding is not correct. Fair enough. And the other point also is that, many a times we try to put this texture, complex things to actually uh, sort of how could I say, it's simple things, like putting somebody in communication blockade for a long time, prolonged time. So if it was some other place, just put this question: if it was some other place, would you have done that? Would you have accepted that? Let's say the similar kind of anger was there in another place. Would we have done that? Because no, some of the options simply is not available in some places, but those options suddenly become available in other places. Isn't there a hypocrisy there? Isn't there some sort of course, that again you'd say that's a complex perspective, that is what
Yeah.
is saying that, but it's fine.
What bothers you the most? Because you said that an elected government does have the right to change a law, and you use this moving phrase that you can give an injection, but you must allow the child to cry. What bothers you? Is it the phone lines? Is it the internet? Is it the politicians who've been arrested? Because there is no curfew today. In fact, people themselves are not coming out. There is, I guess other things have to normalize before people start coming out, even though there is no curfew as such. What bothers you the most?
See, the thing that bothered me most was not the decision per se, and even the decision of the clampdown per se, but the lack of response of the civil society and the media and the judiciary and the parties, so many of it. So it did not have mattered whether the government is listening to us or not. But the rest of the institutions within the democracy had every, it is the responsibility to have raised this voice and say that no, this is not done. Imagine, I cannot believe, maybe I'm wrong again. Imagine an affidavit by PCI saying that we don't mind the restrictions. How can that be given? Imagine a habeas corpus petition being suspended for 10 days thing because the central government did not have a statement. So is that what we expect of our institutions? I know I'm making very difficult statements, and I don't even know the consequences of making these statements. But I was at a phase where I did not bother. I felt it doesn't matter. This has to be said. This has to be said. I have to shout this at the top of the rooftop. I'll do it. So that's what bothered. And then the question came up. So what are you doing? And this also has a bit of local manifestation also. It is not the case that the freedom of expression is an abstract concept, you can understand in another context only. It has a very local manifestation also. Even the place where I was serving also had a issue, because if somebody is trying to raise a voice or a protest, if something unjust is going, especially when it is done by the government side, then suddenly the person who raises its voice is targeted. So the violations could be there earlier also, the violations could be there, later also. But the violations are brought forth only when the voice becomes anti, or the voice becomes slightly protesting in nature. So
But can I,
yes, sorry.
yeah, sorry. No, I wanted to ask you that with this disillusionment that you feel in the other institutions of democracy, the media, the judiciary, the Press Council of India, and so on, where do you then see the mechanism for you to express what you feel? What if you do leave the service and your resignation is accepted? What do you do next? Tell us first a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you come into the civil services? What is your own background? Tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm sure people would want to know.
Yeah. First of all, it is not disillusionment per se, but it is just that I felt maybe a bit of a jolt to us, maybe could have helped, and maybe people were buying into this national interest narrative. Everybody should be on the same bandwagon. Nobody should, because once you decide X is national interest, then everybody should just go by that. And otherwise, you're worried about being proven wrong in this thing, or being shouted down by a larger voice. So we had stopped saying our conviction strongly. We could be wrong. Our perceptions wrong. You yourself said my perception about Kashmir could be wrong. My conviction is based on that perception. So the conviction could itself be wrong.
Sure.
But I have the right to say it.
Right.
And by not withholding that voice, we are actually somehow leaving the dissent space, shrinking the space for dissent. Now, coming back to, so it is not the case of complete, of course,
Okay.
PCA, the reports that are coming now, a lot more reports are now coming. The matter of, okay, how did I come, and what is it that I plan to do? I am an engineer, and basically I studied in BIT Mesra, Jharkhand. So I'm from Kerala. Then I went to Mesra, Jharkhand. My engineering, and then I joined Motorola Semiconductor. It was the free-scale semiconductor, basically, Noida, Film City. And I used to work in parallel in the Juggi. There was a small Juggi along, not a small, sufficiently big Juggi along the drain, which is there. So we used to teach kids there in this thing. So there are quite a few committed individuals along with me, much more committed than me. And then that's where I met my wife also, who is now my wife. And then we started to do in Atta Market, and then we started to do in some other places. And there we failed, in fact, we could say, because the kids were coming today from Jaipur, they are going to Jaipur today, then next week they go to Noida, then they'll go to Gurgaon. These are all happening in the city where, we live. They come, they beg, and they go back, and then, so we tried to teach them, but we could not engage them on a continuous basis. And we could not even meet many a times a district education officer or, people like that. And then it was my wife's call actually to say that, maybe this is not something we should do. We should get into service. And she decided to enter into a coaching center, and I joined her, sort of. I did not have a dream of like that. So I joined her, and since I had cleared my preliminary and I failed in the mains in the first attempt, then she said that, okay, you leave your job, I'll support, and you continue your studies, so that at least you can get through. So she supported me, and then I go through the services, and then that's how I entered the service. So
So is
uh,
she also a bureaucrat?
no, she's not. She's not. So the amount of study, she saw that you have to do. So she said, okay,
Yes.
one is sufficient in the family. You don't have to. And I'm thankful for that, because
Uh,
now I can take this decision.
so what next? What next? Because you mentioned Shah Faisal, and Shah Faisal was, of course, an IAS topper who joined politics. And people may turn around and say, you obviously care about policy, about people, about public issues. You have strong opinions. Is politics the next logical move for you?
Not necessarily. Politics is one of the option, and because I have seen you interviewing Shah Faisal a lot of time, and uh, I people generally try to tell him that, tell so some portray that he left the service so that he had an ambition, political ambition, and so that he continued. I don't find an issue with either of it. Either he had an ambition or he wanted to serve, and both the cases. First, he came into the service on his own talent, his own merit. He came into the service, and then after that he left on his own volition, and he went, and either be it ambition or be it the interest to serve, it
Yeah,
is his right, and it is a very legitimate way in a
sure.
political democracy. In fact, that is the largest, biggest show of trust on in democracy. That is the where things can be changed. Now, coming to me, whether I would like to enter into politics, I have not really thought of it. Actually, the last 1 week, I'm just trying to get my things together. I know I would prefer a salaried job, actually.
But
Because
are you joining duty again? Because we have read in the media that you've been given a notice to rejoin work again immediately. So your resignation has not been accepted, or what is the status of that?
no, it's like this. I'm not very well versed with the resignation process, because you generally don't see so many resignation processes. The thing is that I had applied for resignation, and it is under process. So what
Okay.
it is a procedural notice. I think it was said that since I was not here, so they pasted it on the wall or
Yes.
something, and it just said that since it is not yet accepted, it did not say it is rejected. It is not yet accepted. So during this period, you come back and join. But with the normal course, of course, I would have joined. I think it would have been appropriate for me to join. But now that I have made my statements loud about my views and thoughts, I think the fact that we are discussing now, I think it might not be appropriate for me to rejoin at this time. And this is because I have not taken my resignation back, and I have also not. They have also not rejected the resignation. It is only for the intervening period that they are saying you come and join.
Okay.
So I don't find it appropriate for this period, but I'll definitely consult what to do.
Finally, what is your dream for this country? Because you obviously feel strongly about things. What is, if in one line you had to say, what is the kind of democracy you want us to be?
I want us to be a democracy and a governance system that is demand driven rather than a supply driven system. Uh, right now, many people who know me or who respected had a good thinking, or they had kept me at a good distance. They are asking me, if people like you, this is the exact question I'm asking, like saying that if people like you leave the service, then
Yes.
how do you make change from within the system?
Yes.
Because there we are making an assumption that system is supply driven, because good officers enter, and the officer thinks he should do something, and the system changes, and I am trying to make something. So I might do something, and then another officer might come, he might not, or might do better, or he might do worse, and then another officer might come, then it could be zero again, we start from zero. So this is a purely supply driven governance system, where you're dependent on the officers and their goodwill and their intentions and their commitment delivery, which is not the case. You don't see the kind of individual centric governance that happens in our country in advanced democracies. The individuals are not very important. You can go, somebody else will come in, it doesn't matter. At least 80% of the delivery is demand driven. So people have expectations, and people have set the standards that this much of delivery, governance delivery, has to happen. If X comes, okay, 10% more innovation might happen, but 80% delivery will always happen. So I would want it to be I would want our governance system to be a demand driven, and I would want our democracy to be full of dissent, where we enjoy, relish discussing, disagreeing, and still, having, having the courage and respect to say, love to have the discussion with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that is something I do agree with you on, that we just have lost the capacity to agree to disagree and to have to shake hands after a volatile disagreement, and that is indeed how a democracy should be. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you, Kannan, and we wish you all the best for whatever you do decide to do next. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.